everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to be making a bag that I have been wanting to make since years before I made my first bag. Today, we're going to be making the Rosie crossbody bag from Swoon. So before I show you the bag, I just want to show you, I have the paper pattern of this, which is not that significant to most of us, I understand, but to me it is because I never buy paper patterns. I only buy digital patterns. I go through a lot of patterns. But I actually bought this pattern when I was a quilter. Years and years before I ever sewed a zipper for the first time, I bought the Rosie crossbody bag because this is a style of bag that 20-something, most of 30-something-year-old Jessica wore all the time. This was my favorite style. And I bought that pattern thinking, one day I want to make a bag, and I want to make that bag. I want to be good enough to make that bag, and then I'll never have to buy another bag again. I'll just make my own bags forever. And it's kind of funny because I finally made the bag. I mean, we finally made the bag, and it was worth the wait, but you shouldn't wait that long to make this bag. It is not a challenging bag. Let me just go over it real quick. So you can see it's a beautiful crossbody bag. It has this nice oversized flap with a magnetic snap on it. Lift that up, and we have a nice opening and then a zip pocket on the inside. Flip it around, and we have another zip pocket on the back of the bag, which I love because this is my cell phone pocket. You know, when you're moving around doing stuff, kind of going out and about, you want to have easy access to your cell phone. You don't have to like open the flap, dig around, unzip pockets, but you also want it to be safe, right? You don't want to just put it in your pocket because then, for me anyways, it just falls right out. So this is where I put my cell phone. So it's against my body, it's easy to get to, but it's also safe. We have a nice chunky strap, which I really love. I'm using webbing, of course, because I have decided since all these new webbings have come out, I don't need to spend my time making bag straps anymore. And I just love this bag so much. Now, for this version here, I used vinyl for the exterior, waterproof canvas for the lining, webbing for the straps. There's no interfacing. I did not use any woven interfacing. I did not use any fusible fleece, no Decoville light. You can add any of those depending on your material. We'll go over that in the pattern today. However, if you want to make this quick, like really quick, and you know your machine can handle vinyl, go with that. Vinyl, waterproof canvas, webbing. Bada bing, bada boom, and you're done. And these curves, I know a lot of beginners out there are gonna be like, I don't know about those curves, Jess. These are very forgiving curves. Very forgiving curves, so don't let the curves scare you. All right, let me go grab my step stool and I'll show you what this bag looks like on. So for reference, I am 5 feet 4 inches and a size small. And this, so I would wear it as a crossbody. You don't have to wear it as a crossbody, but this is what it looks like that. And look at that. Isn't that like the perfect size? Oh, I owned so many of these bags when I was younger. I paid so much money. Oh my gosh. And now that I can make my own, I love it so much. I love this bag. So I want you to notice it does have this detailing on the front. You can get very creative with that. You do not have to add this detailing at all. You can just have the flap. It is just one flap underneath the detailing. Or you can get like super creative. Have you guys seen the applique video I put out? I'll link it below, but you could applique on a design here. Oh, I would have to do that. So thank you so much to Swoon for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorials. I've always loved Swoon. I would probably say they're one of the first bag designers that I ever like noticed before I started making bags. And they're actually like the first people who gave me the thumbs up to film their patterns in my tutorials when I first started the channel, and I reached out to them and I was like, is there any way I can use your patterns in my tutorials? And they said, sure, go for it, have a good time. So I'm just eternally grateful to Swoon, I really am. And they are consistently one of my favorite go-to designers. Like I know I can pick any pattern, it's gonna turn out, it's gonna be amazing, I'm gonna love it. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shoutouts, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. I will have timestamps for every single step of this tutorial. They will be down in the description. So there's like a little arrow over here. If you click that, the description will expand. You'll have links for all of the materials, including the pattern and the stuff I'm using. You'll have links for all of the timestamps, but you'll also have all of the timestamps running right along the bottom of the screen right here. So you can just hover over that and go to where you need to go in the pattern. All right, guys, this is a fun one. Let's get started. So today I'm gonna mix up the material just a little bit. For the main exterior of the bag, I'm gonna be using this vinyl right here. This is such a fun vinyl. It's color changing. And then for the flap, I'm gonna use this fun like iridescent vinyl. And since I didn't plan my cuts out appropriately. I'm actually going to use that little contrast, like decorative piece on the flap. I'm going to use this vinyl. This is kind of like a textured, cool vinyl. So overall you need 1 yard of exterior fabric and ½ a yard of contrasting fabric. So you can really mix it up a lot here. The pattern does suggest quilt weight cotton. I'm using vinyl today because this is a vinyl that I'm comfortable working with. None of it is really that thick or dense or anything like that, so I can easily sew this at my sewing machine, and since it's vinyl, I don't have to add any interfacing. The pattern calls for ½ a yard of lining fabric, but it does mention using the contrast fabric for some of the pockets. I'm not going to do that. I'm using lining material for all lining pieces, including pockets. So if you were going to do that, I would suggest probably a yard of lining material. I'm using this awesome waterproof canvas. This is from Wonderground Fabrics. It's their newer waterproof canvas, and it is very lightweight. Very, very lightweight, very papery. Perfect for domestic machines, and you don't have to interface it. So I'll be using this today for the lining. The only interfacing I'm using today is a small scrap of Decoville Heavy, and this is just for the installation of the magnetic snaps. I'm not using any fusible fleece or woven interfacing. So woven interfacing you're going to use on any quilt weight or cotton lycra material. Think if the fabric can fray or stretch, you want to use the woven interfacing on that. The pattern also calls for fusible fleece to kind of beef up the quilt weight cotton. Since I'm using vinyl and waterproof canvas, I really don't need to beef it up. I was considering using Decoville Light, but honestly, just to keep this as simple as possible, the vinyl and the waterproof canvas work perfectly. However, when installing magnetic snaps, you do want to add a little bit more support to those. So Decoville Light, Decoville Heavy, fusible fleece, even a scrap piece of vinyl will be fine. You just want to add something when you're installing those. So here are the hardware bits today. First, I have a magnetic snap. This is going to be for the closure of the flap. Then I have some rivets. I just love to add rivets when I can, so I have some rivets here. Next, I have some webbing, and this is 1½ inch wide webbing. You're gonna need at least 2 yards of your webbing. Next, we have zipper tape. The pattern calls for 2 9-inch zippers. I would say about a yard of zipper tape if you're gonna be using that, and then 2 zipper pulls. To go with the strap, I have 2 rectangle rings and 1 slider. So this is not a removable crossbody strap. If you wanted to do that, you definitely can. Just instead of the rectangle rings, use D rings or triangle rings, and then add in a couple of swivel hooks that will be the same size as your strap. You can definitely do that. But in this pattern, it is not a removable strap. All right, here's all the other stuff. Like I said, I love using rivets. Here's my rivet press. I have a whole video going over the rivet press and all the dies I like for it. But if you're using a rivet press, you're gonna want the dies to go with what you're gonna be setting. So for example, on the rivet press already, I have the dies for the rivets, but then I also have this die set here for the magnetic snaps. I love this paper tape. This is great at holding stuff down and you can sew over it. It doesn't leave any sort of sticky stuff on your fabric. This is fantastic tape here. Next, I have my top thread, which is a Tex 45 weight thread. It's a little thick, so it looks really nice when you're top stitching. If you're not comfortable with that thicker thread, you can go with a Tex 35 weight thread, or you can go with the Gutermann Mara 100 or 70 weight. I'll have links for all that down below. And then in the bobbin thread, I just have some Gutermann thread from Joann's, and the needle I'll be using today is a Microtex 8012. If you're using really thick material, you might want to use a 9014, but since my waterproof canvas is a little bit on the thinner side, I don't want to use too thick of a needle because then it doesn't work well with the thinner material. So 8012 is going to be perfect today. I have my bag tag as always, and then I've got these fun little sew-in tags. This will be sewn into the final step of the pattern. It's just a fun little addition. These are from our shop. It says just a little bit wonky because it will be, I can already tell. Of course, always a healthy supply of clips, and in here is where I also have my seam ripper and stiletto combo. I have another stiletto because I keep one by the machine and one on the table. I have a vinyl marking pen, an air erasing marking pen, a lighter to clean up little threads in the end, a small 1" by 6" ruler, and then super sticky leather tape. This is going to be to hold the webbing on the sides. I'll show you that. And then also some wash away 1/4" double-sided tape. This is for zipper installation. So here are all the pattern pieces. There's really not a whole lot, which is great. It makes this bag very quick to put together. First, let's talk about the flap. I have my contrasting vinyl here for the flap, and then also a lining cut. Like I said, nothing is interfaced today. However, if any of this is quilt cotton or cotton lycra, you're going to want to add the woven interfacing, and you might also want to add fusible fleece or Decoville Light. Fusible fleece is going to give your bag a very squishy, comfy, pillow-like feel. Decoville Light is going to give your bag like a leather feel. It's going to feel very firm and structured, very fancy. Next, I have the main panel. So for that, that's just the main panel in the bag. 2 lining cuts and 2 exterior cuts. To go with the flap, I have the decorative strip, and this is just that piece of vinyl. We will be folding the raw edges back. Honestly, with vinyl, you don't have to do that. You can leave these raw edges as is. You can even just trim it down a little bit to trim off the seam allowance. If you want to edge coat it, you can. If you want to add piping here, you can. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with this, but I'm going to fold the edges back and show you how that's done. Then you have the gusset. That's 1 cut of lining material and 1 cut of exterior material. And finally, you have your pockets. You're going to have 2 pockets today, 1 pocket on the lining, 1 pocket on the back exterior piece. So you're going to need 4 cuts of your pocket panel. So because we will be using midpoints a lot today, I suggest before you even get started, take every single one of your pieces, fold it in half, and find all your midpoints on the long edges and the short edges. Just find those midpoints, mark them however you like. You can use scissors here if you want to make a teeny tiny cut, or you can use some sort of a marking tool. Just mark all the midpoints now so we don't have to worry about it later. So let's first work on installing the magnetic snaps. So take a ruler and measure 2 1/4 inch up from the bottom midpoint of the bottom of your exterior main panel. So once you have that spot marked, grab a hole punch and just punch a hole where that spot is. Now, if you're not using rivet magnetic snaps, if instead you're using the magnetic snaps with the prongs on the back, you're just going to use the washer, mark the slits for the prongs, use a seam ripper to cut those slits, and then insert your magnetic snap that way. I'm just using the magnetic snaps that have a rivet on the back. So I'm just going to punch 1 hole where I marked. I'm then going to take a small, like 1 inch by 1 inch, just a small cut of Decoville Heavy, and I'm going to punch a hole right in the center of that. So now I'm going to take the female snap, and the female snap is usually a little bit thicker, and I'm going to insert that so that the female part is on the right side of the exterior. And I flip it over. I'm going to take my piece of interfacing. Again, this can be interfacing. This can also be a scrap piece of vinyl. Just anything that beefs up this snap area. And it doesn't matter which type of magnetic snap you're using. You do need this little extra piece here. So then I'll take my snap and just snap it on like that. There we go. Now I've got my other rivet press. You don't need 2 or anything. I just have one that I keep the hole punch on. And I'm going to insert the die for the magnetic snap. And then I can just lay this in there and snap it down. There we go, there's 1. And now we're gonna repeat this with the lining side of the flap. So the flap is gonna connect to that. So the lining side, or the contrasting side, the underside of the flap. We're gonna do that, except instead of 2 1/2 inches, we're gonna measure up only 2 inches this time. And just like before, we will pop a hole where we marked it, and then grab a scrap piece of whatever and put a hole in that as well, or slits if you're using prong magnetic snaps. And then on the right side of the lining or contrasting bottom side of your flap, put your male magnetic snap in there, flip it over, insert your stabilizer on the back, and then your washer or your cap, get that in there. If you're using a rivet press, make sure you change out the bottom die, and then just set this. All right, you can put these to the side for now. Next, grab the exterior flap, so this is the top part of the flap, and also that little decorative strip, if you're deciding to use the decorative strip. Now, you don't have to. If you have a cool print or you just really like the flap as is, there is no need to add this decorative strip. This is just for fun. So on the wrong side of this decorative strip, I'm just gonna mark in 1/4 inch away from these decorative edges here, these little curvy edges over here on both sides. So you could also choose to mark in 1/2 inch, so that way you know how far to bring the fold over edge. I like 1/4 inch because I am gonna mark very small slits along this edge, and I wanna make sure I don't go past that 1/4 inch mark, because then you're gonna see the slits on the right side. So since this is a curve, it's going to curve better for me if I mark little slits, especially since I'm using a firmer material like this cool vinyl. So you don't have to make a lot, just small ones, and you're only going about 1/8 inch in, so halfway to your marked lines, just a little bit so it can spread out a bit when we fold it back. All right, so now I'm gonna try this with the wash away tape. I'm just going to put it right along the very edge of one of these curved sides. And I gotta be quick before my air erasing marker disappears. We'll see if this holds it. So I've got some tape right along the edge. Now I'm gonna remove that paper from the tape. And then I'm just gonna fold this wrong sides together right on that marked line. Now don't overthink this. And if it's not sticking, grab yourself some clips and help hold it down. And just do your best to fold on those marked lines. Like I said, if it's not perfect, that's okay. All right, so I'm hoping those clips will help that tape stick a little bit better. So let's do this on the other side as well. All right, so now here's our decorative strip. And what we wanna do is we wanna just place it centered on the exterior flap. And this is where having all those midpoint marks is gonna come in really handy because you don't wanna put it on like that. You know, you wanna center the top and also center the bottom. Now, to help hold this in place and also to help keep these flaps down, I'm gonna use the super sticky double-sided tape. This double-sided tape is not tape you really want to sew over, but if I apply it right along the edge on the back side, I can hold down these curved edges and also not sew over it because I'll be sewing at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And as long as I don't get it there, I should be okay. So I'm not going all the way up. I'm only going to where the edge stops. So that way I shouldn't sew it on the top or bottom edges either. So you see I just added this tape right along the edge. It's not near the folded edge. It's just right along the raw edge. And that's gonna hold it down as well. All right, so I've got the tape on there. I'm gonna remove the paper. I'm gonna do one side at a time. So I'm gonna line up the top edge, midpoint marks, and also the bottom edge, midpoint marks. There we go. I'm just gonna push down the side that has the tape. Perfect. And all I have to do is lift up the other side and carefully remove the paper. There we go. That looks cool. I mean, it's a subtle difference, but I think like in the light, that'll look pretty neat. So now all we have to do is go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch down along these folded edges and also the bottom and the top at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you have that done, take your flap lining or contrasting, just the other side of the flap, and we're gonna lay them right sides together. Once again, I like to match up the midpoints on the top and the bottom, and then I'll also match up the corners and the sides. Once you have them clipped together, we're gonna sew along the curved sides and the bottom at 1/2 of an inch seam allowance, but this top little smile up here, we're gonna leave that unsewn. Just make sure you backstitch really well at the beginning and the end because we will be turning it all out through this hole up here. Once you have it sewn, we're gonna trim the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. If you feel more comfortable, you can just cut it in half. I know cutting close to the stitches it makes me a little nervous too because you don't want to accidentally cut your stitches. So don't feel like you have to cut right next to them. You do not. And just to help out a tiny bit right around some of these curves, I will make, the teeniest, tiniest snip. Honestly, if you cut this down to 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, you don't need to do any snips like this at all. You're totally fine. That skinny seam allowance is going to allow the material to stretch where it needs to stretch. But if you did more of like a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you might want to make just little tiny snips around some of these corners here. Now let's flip this right side out. All right, once it's flipped out, what I like to do is just reach inside and I just roll these edges down. Depending on your material, rolling these edges down can be really easy or more tedious. If you're using quilt cotton, you can just roll them down and press it with an iron. Otherwise, you might want to roll them and add clips like I am. And the nice thing with kind of rolling it with your fingers like this is that you get it to look the way you want. So if I don't want that lining piece peeking through, I can just make sure I roll it a little bit more so that the vinyl kind of curls back and hides that lining. And go around all the edges doing this. All right, now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along all the edges, including the top, at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you're using bulkier material and you're like, man, if I go over this, I'm gonna break my needle, then just increase it to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just make sure you're aware of where your snap is back here. You don't wanna get too close to that. to go. This flap is looking so cute. So now let's put the flap to the side. So now we're gonna work on the zipper pocket on the exterior. And here's the thing, you can put it on either one of the exterior panels. You can put it on the panel that has the magnetic snap, and then the zipper pocket would be like hidden underneath the flap, which I think is really cool. Or you can put it on the back panel. I like it on the back panel because that's the panel that goes against my body, and I can put my cell phone or like my cash in it, and it's really close to me, I don't have to worry about it. But if you put it on the side with the flap, I mean, the flap is covering it as well. So either one of those options would be great. So on the back of your exterior main panel, you're gonna mark a box that is centered, and it is 1.5 inches down from the top edge, and it's 1/2 inch tall and 8 inches wide. To make it easier, I do suggest grabbing a ruler and marking a straight line from the 2 midpoint lines going down. That way your rectangle isn't crooked, because we don't have any straight edges here. It is hard to keep this straight. So give yourself a straight edge by marking a straight line down like that, and then use that to help you measure 1.5 inches down, 1/2 inch below that, and then you have a nice little 8 inch by 1/2 inch box in the center. Now grab one of your pocket panels, take your exterior main and lay it right side up. Take a pocket panel and we're gonna lay it right side down along the exterior piece. So using a ruler, you're gonna measure down from this top midpoint mark. And I'm gonna suggest you measure down 3/4 inch, so that way you have a little bit of overhang on the top of that rectangle. And you're just going to center this. So use the center mark on your pocket panel and the center mark on your exterior panel to center this pocket. And then I'm gonna use my tape to tape it in place. There we go. You don't want this moving around on you, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this over, go to the sewing machine, and we're gonna just stitch along this inner rectangle right here. And we wanna make sure we're going through the exterior and also the lining panels. Once you have that stitched down, you can mark yourself a midpoint line. So this is gonna be 1/4 inch from one of the long edges, going down the center of this little window here. And then I just go to one of the corners of our window and just make a diagonal line to that midpoint mark. I don't measure it. I mean, you can measure it so to make sure it's a 1/2 inch in or 3/8 of an inch in. I just go corner of rectangle to middle line like that. Now I'm gonna grab my seam ripper and I'm gonna rip right along that middle, just enough so I can get my scissors in there. And I'm going through the exterior panel and also the lining on the back. And I'm gonna cut along that line until I get to the very tip of that triangle. And then I'm gonna go off towards the corner, and I'm gonna get as close as I can to the stitches without cutting the stitches. No cutting thread here. We're just cutting the material. And repeat this for the other side. All right, if you have tape, go ahead and remove that. And then just push that lining through the hole. And this lightweight waterproof canvas works so good for these type of pockets. Normally waterproof canvas is kind of a pain with these pockets, but this one actually creases really well and doesn't fight you so much. The vinyl, however, is going to fight me. So to help with this, I'm going to straighten out this top edge here, and then I'm gonna grab some tape and I'm just gonna tape it down. You could also iron this if you'd like. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom. I'm just gonna roll it down, and I'll tape the sides and also the bottom of this pocket. All right, we don't need it to stay perfect for long. We just need it to stay perfect for a little bit. So I'm just gonna stick this on top of there so it doesn't untape on me. And then I'm gonna grab my zipper tape. And you can measure this out, but I like to just kind of eyeball it. I just wanna make sure my zipper tape is longer than my pocket window. I like it nice and long. So my zipper tape is about 10.5 inches long. I like it nice and long. I've had problems before with zippers coming in on the side, so I like it extra long. I'm gonna grab my zipper pull and just attach that to my zipper tape. All right, once I have my zipper ready to go, I'm gonna grab my wash away double-sided tape, and I'm going to add it right along the very edge of my zipper tape. This is gonna be to help hold it in place in that little window. You're working with things like vinyl and waterproof canvas and things like that, and you're using this type of tape. Like, this paper tape is not duct tape, right? If you're using really thick duct tape, you can tape it all down and it's not gonna go anywhere. But I'm using lightweight tape, so it'll hold it down for a bit, but it won't hold it down forever. So you try to be a little quick. Not so much that you're rushed, but once that tape starts coming undone, it's gonna be a lot more difficult. All right, so with the zipper going towards the left when closed, I'm gonna lay my zipper right side up, and I'm gonna remove the paper from the tape on the top edge. And then I'm gonna grab my exterior piece here, and I'm gonna center it over my zipper tape and just push down that top edge. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfect just yet. So just get it on there and then close the zipper all the way. And then you can kind of move stuff around. And I'll be honest, I never get these things that straight. All right, once that's good, I'm gonna flip this up. I'm gonna remove the paper from the tape on the bottom edge and then flip it back down. So that looks pretty good. A little wonky, that's okay. So now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along all 4 edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I will be using a zipper foot and I'm just gonna go real slow. I'm also gonna make sure I backstitch over the zipper coils. Remember, these zipper coils look metal, but they're not, they're plastic. So I can stitch over them without breaking my needle, but I do like to go over them once, backstitch, go over them again, and then continue on, because this does get a lot of use right here. Those corners get pushed a lot. All right, that looks good. Straight? No, but good. I did backstitch at the beginning and the end of the stitching. I also left the tails nice and long. I like to kind of double that up, especially on zippers. So I'm gonna flip it to the back right now. And I have my bobbin tails. So just the 2 bobbin threads from the beginning and the end, nice and long. I'm gonna pull on those just a little bit. I'm gonna grab a stiletto and just pull the top thread to the back. So now I have all 4 threads on the back side, and then I just double them up, so 2 and 2, and then I tie them together with a triple knot, and then I'll just trim them down. And I don't burn the edges off of these ones because they're really not seen. You can if you'd like, but you don't need to. If you use tape, go ahead and remove the tape. Now you're going to grab another one of your lining panels for the pocket, and you notice I haven't trimmed the zipper tape down yet. I'm actually going to sew the zipper tape into the sides of the pocket panel, not into the sides of the main panel, but the pocket panel here. You don't have to, but I like to. So you're gonna take another pocket panel and lay it right side down along the back edge of your zipper and just line it up with the other pocket panel. One might be a little bit bigger than the other because when we make these types of pockets, it has a tendency to kind of suck in and shrink the material. That's okay. But I'm just clipping only the pocket panels together. I'm not clipping anything to the main panel. So when we sew this, we're gonna flip it up so it's exterior main right side up, and then we're gonna fold the exterior main panel out of the way and sew along all of the edges of only the pocket panels at a 1/2 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. For this top edge here, if you can't get a 1/2 of an inch, just get as close as you can to the top of the zipper because you're not really gonna use this space anyways. So once that's sewn, now I'm going to trim down the zipper tape and also a little bit of the seam allowance on the pocket. Just be extra careful you don't go through the exterior at any point. There we go, isn't it a cute little pocket? I like that. So now we're gonna repeat that with a lining panel. So grab one of your lining main panels and you can lay it wrong side up. And once again, we're going to measure that 8" by 1/2 of an inch rectangle on the back. Like I said, the first thing I like to do is draw a midpoint line going along the top midpoint to the bottom midpoint, and that will make it easier for me to line up my ruler 1.5 inches down so that I can make a straight rectangle. So I've got my rectangle marked. I'm gonna flip this over to look at the right side of the lining and grab one of my pocket panels. And then using the midpoint marks and a ruler, I'm gonna measure this pocket panel to come down 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll just tape these together, right sides together to hold it in place. And once again, let's go back to the machine and let's sew along this inner 8" by 1/2 of an inch rectangle. We're just gonna follow the lines, make sure we pivot at the corners. So once again, I'm gonna use the long edges of the stitching to help me mark a midpoint mark going along the center of this window. And then I'll make myself some little triangles coming from the corners down to meet that midpoint mark. And using a seam ripper, I'm gonna go right in the middle and rip right along that center line. Grab my scissors and cut right along that center line all the way to the tip of the triangle. And then just cut off towards the corners without cutting the stitching. And if you use tape, you can go ahead and remove that. And then push the pocket through the hole so that now your two panels are wrong sides together. And if you'd like, you can iron this. But actually, this particular waterproof canvas takes pretty well at just being pressed with your fingers. But if an iron's easier, go ahead and use an iron. All right, so that actually holds it down pretty well, but I'm still gonna add just a couple pieces of tape. Once again, just gonna put something heavy on that to hold it in place. I'm gonna take my zipper tape and cut myself another about 10-inch long piece of zipper tape. And I'll take my remaining zipper pull, attach it to my zipper tape, and then I'll grab my wash away double-sided tape and attach that to the very edge of the zipper tape. Okay, so lining panel right side up, zipper right side up, and when the zipper is closed, it's going towards the left. I'm gonna take the paper off that top edge, take my main panel and just center it over my zipper tape and tape it down. There we go. And then I like to close the zipper all the way to the left, just like that. Get it as straight as I can get it. And then I'll flip the unit up so that I can get to the zipper tape and then peel back the paper and then put it back down. All right, now we can just go around this little window and top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so I'm making one small change to the pattern, and it's on this step. And so for that change, you really want to make sure you backstitch well over the small edges here of your zipper tape. You really want to do it because I'm going to change the pattern so that we turn the whole bag out through this zipper pocket instead of through a hole in the exterior in the final step. It makes it easier to top stitch in the end. So once again, I left my tails long. Let's flip back. Always just check and make sure you caught your entire zipper tape. These zipper tapes can be sneaky and they can move on you, and you don't want that. So now I'm just gonna pull on these bobbin threads, and then I like to use a stiletto to pull the top thread to the back, and then just triple knot the threads on the back to help hold it in place, and then trim down those threads. All right, so we are going to attach the back panel of the zipper pocket, similar to how we did before, but we're gonna leave an opening. So let's just clip these right sides together first, and then we'll discuss how we're gonna leave an opening. Remember, we're only clipping the pocket panels, we're not clipping the main panel here. All right, so flip it so the main lining panel is right side up, and let's flip up that bottom edge. Now what I wanna do is I wanna mark a 5-inch opening on the bottom of this curve. And I know it's curved, we prefer it if it's straight, but we got what we got. So I'm just gonna kind of center it, and I'm just measuring it out with my eyeballs. 5 inches, 5-inch hole. Remember, this is a lining zipper pocket. If this isn't perfectly curved in the very end, it will be okay. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go around this panel. So I'm gonna start at one of my marks, and I'm gonna sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance along the edges. And then up here along the top, just as close as I can get to the zipper, back down the other side, and I'm gonna stop at the other mark. So this is gonna stay unsewn. Backstitch really well at the beginning and the end here. Now looking at the back, I'm gonna trim my seam allowance again, but I'm not gonna trim where the opening is. That's gonna make it easier to turn and close up later. So I'm just gonna start at the edge there, and then just trim the seam allowance pretty much in half all the way around. Also trimming off any extra zipper tape, making sure I'm not trimming the main panel on my lining. I also don't trim this top edge here. Just going carefully down here. And then I'll stop cutting once I get to the other edge of the opening. Just cut it off like that. So now you see you have like a little tab sticking out. All right, the lining is prepped. You can put that to the side. So now you're gonna wanna grab your webbing, your rectangle rings, some super sticky tape. So if you're using webbing like I am, you're gonna cut 2 pieces of webbing that are both 4 inches long. And with nylon webbing especially, you're gonna wanna grab a lighter and melt down these edges, okay? Just melt them down. We don't want these fraying. This is just for both edges of both pieces of webbing. Now take your exterior gusset, and you should have midpoint marks on the short edges of your exterior gusset. You're gonna measure 1.5 inches down from those midpoint marks, and just use your vinyl pen or any sort of fabric pen and mark a line. And that's just gonna help you place these in the next step. So do this for both of the short edges. Now grab one of your webbing strips, and you're gonna wrap it around one of the long edges of your rectangle rings, and you're gonna bring both of the raw edges of your strip to the back side. So we're not gonna match them up on the edge like this. They're not going in a seam. We're gonna pull them both back and try to center them on the back. If you wanna measure to get it perfect, you can. I just eyeball it. There we go. So I'm gonna use some clips to hold these in place like this. I'm gonna do this for both of my strap connectors. And now I'm gonna cut about a 1-inch piece of super sticky double-sided tape. And I'm going to apply it to the back at like a diagonal, just like that. And that's gonna help hold these together and also attach it to my exterior. But I'm trying to attach it so that I don't sew over it. If you sew over it a tiny bit, that's fine. Don't worry about that. You don't want to sew over it much. So working at a diagonal like that helps hold it in place. So now I'm gonna take one edge here, and I know you can't see it, but I can see where my mark is. And I'm gonna remove the paper on the back of my strap connector. And I'm just gonna center it on that mark. Just kind of step back and look and make sure it looks centered on the gusset. That looks good. Okay, and now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch. I'm gonna use a zipper foot to get as close as I can to this bar right here without hitting the metal bar, and then go around the sides and the bottom at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm gonna do that twice. I wanna go around this twice like that. Alright, there we go. Isn't that sweet? So I'm just gonna repeat that exact same process with the other short end. Alright, so that looks great as is, but I think I'm gonna add a couple of rivets. I think that's cute. We're gonna do it. And since we have this nice, easy center strip here, it'll make placement very easy. So I'm just going to use a marker and my eyeballs to do this. You can measure it if you'd like. I'm gonna grab the press that I have with the hole punch and just punch out the 2 holes after I mark them. And then I'll take a rivet and just push it through the hole and snap it in place. There we go. These look cute. So I'm gonna do that with the other side as well. Then I'll grab my rivet press and put on the dies for these rivets. There we go. And then I'll just quickly press these down. That's why I like rivets. They're such a quick but really cute and also useful attachment. I mean, this is going to help with the sturdiness of the strap connectors. Alrighty, the gusset is ready to go, looking cute. So the final thing I'm gonna do before we sew it all together is just attach my bag label. This is kind of a tricky bag to figure out where you want the label. You can put it on the flap if you'd like. I like it actually underneath the flap. I know it makes it a little bit harder to see, or right above the pocket in the lining. That's also a cool place to put it. But I'm just gonna measure down, let's see. I'm gonna measure down about 2.5 inches from the top edge. Let's see if I can get this straight. I doubt it. My bag label, I never get them straight. How does that look? Does that look straight? I mean, it looks straight. Yeah, it's good. So now I'm gonna top stitch along all 4 edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so you can see I left the tails long again. I do not backstitch when I do my tags. I like it to be a bit of a mystery. Where does it start? Where does it end? So now I'm just gonna pull all the threads to the back and triple knot them. Okay, there we go. Now all of our pieces are ready to go, so we can just sew the whole bag together. So you can start with either one of your exterior main panels. So take your exterior main panel, lay it right side up, and then grab your gusset, and we're gonna lay the gusset right side down, just like that. First, we're gonna match up the midpoints, so midpoint on the long edge of the gusset with midpoint on the bottom edge of one of your exterior main panels. Find those. I like to clip right at the midpoint, and then I also clip just to the sides of it. It's a very curvy bag, so you're gonna be working with this stuff a lot. And then I'm gonna take the left one, and I'm gonna fold the rectangle ring down. And I'm gonna take this top left corner and match it up with the top left corner on the exterior main. You're gonna kinda have to twist it, because again, very curvy. So I'm just gonna twist it so it matches up with that corner, clip in place. I'm also gonna clip it on this top flat edge over here just to hold it there. And then I'll clip along a bit of the straight edge. There's really no straight edge here, but I'm gonna do my best to start clipping from the middle towards the corner and then from the top towards the corner. The goal is to clip this sharper corner last. So I get it started like that, and I'm just gonna leave that, and we'll do both sides at the same time. So I'm gonna repeat this with the right side, fold the rectangle ring down, pull it up, right sides together, match up those top right corners. I'm particularly interested in making sure I'm lining up this right edge here. So I'm gonna clip that together. And I'm also gonna clip it to the top so it doesn't move. And I can go around the edge and also on the bottom, just kind of like wiggling my way down towards that tighter corner. Okay, so that's kind of like setup. So now we're gonna flip the whole thing over so that we're looking at the back of the main panel. And what I do is I tuck it into the gusset like a bowl. So I'm not trying to flatten my gusset out. My gusset is like a wall. It's like a curved wall that stands up straight. And the main panel is gonna be tucked in like a bowl. Just like this. And these types of curves can be challenging or fairly simple depending on your material. Quilt cotton, you think might be a little bit easier because it does have more stretch to it, but what happens is it ends up stretching too much, and that's how you get the pleats. Vinyl doesn't really have stretch to it, but the measurements of these pattern pieces is pretty spot on. I haven't had any issues with pleating or anything like that. I mean, it all lines up. I mean, look at that. It just lines up perfectly. I don't even have to rework this. Usually I have to like clip it and then unclip some spots and try to flatten it out. It all just comes together really perfectly. Okay, so now when we sew this, we're actually going to sew it with the gusset side up. And we're going to sew it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. If you find that you're just like really struggling with some stuff, you can grab your scissors and clip about 1/4 inch into the gusset panel so the gusset can spread out a little bit and help go around those corners. Just try to only do it when you need to. Don't overdo it because you're going to have it spread out too much and you're going to have pleats on the gusset. All right, if you'd like, go ahead and flip it right side out just to look and make sure you don't have any pleats or anything. There's nothing here. This vinyl is just perfect. I tell you what, this vinyl, it just stitches up so beautifully. I love it. All right, so I'm gonna flip it back out. Now I'm gonna grab the other exterior panel and I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm gonna lay the remaining exterior panel right side up. And I'm actually gonna move my zipper pull to the center just because it's kind of big and I don't wanna worry about sewing over it. Then I'm going to take my unit with the gusset, I'm going to lay it right side down, and I'm looking at the raw edge of the gusset that has not been sewn. And I'm going to line up the midpoint mark on that gusset edge with the midpoint mark on the other exterior panel, and clip them at the midpoint, and also just right next to the midpoint, because it does like to twist around on you. And then I'm just going to flip out this top left corner. Again, I like to push that ring down. Clip the top left corners together and just kind of add a couple clips on the side. Don't worry so much about the curves just yet. And then repeat this for the top right corner. And then flip the whole unit so that you're looking at the back of the exterior panel and create like a little bowl with the exterior panel, a little wall with the gusset, however you want to visualize it. Okay, just like before, we're going to flip this over and we're going to sew with the gusset side up. And again, I know it's such a beautiful shape. We love it like this, but you gotta just shove that down. I know you don't want to do it. I don't want to do it either, but we're gonna do it anyways when we turn the whole bag out. It's gonna get smushed and wrinkled and creased and everything. So make it easier on yourself. Smush this down so that you can easily sew along this. When I go next to the rings, they are pretty close to that seam, so I kind of like lift up the edge like this. So I kind of sew it with the rings facing up so I can get nice and close, and then I just easily sew around the rest of it. All of this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and it's always a good idea to backstitch at the tops. Okay, looking cute. So I'm just gonna trim down this seam allowance in 1/2 to reduce the bulk, and it'll make it easier for these curves to come out on the exterior. If you're using a thick vinyl, you might wanna go around this a second time. I would say this vinyl is more of like a medium weight vinyl. I don't think I need to go around it again. Let me see. Let me just do the test real quick. I'll push it out. No, that's good. When I kind of put some force on the curves, I'm not seeing the stitches really prominently, so that's good. It's like a medium weight vinyl, but it's more fluffy than it is thick. It's not as dense as some other vinyl that would be the same thickness. All right, so since I'm already here and I have everything the way I want it, I'm gonna attach the flap. So I am working on attaching the flap to the panel with the zipper. That's where it's gonna go. This zipper panel here is gonna be the back panel. The flap is attached to the back panel. So I'm gonna have this, I'm looking at the right side of the back panel, and then I'm gonna take my flap, exterior, right sides together with that back panel. You don't have to tuck it inside, just line it up along the top edge. Use those midpoint marks on the flap and the exterior panel to match this up, because the flap is not the same width as the exterior main panel. So line it up at the midpoint marks and then clip it right sides together, and just do your best to make sure that the other exterior panel kind of stays out of the way. If you want to tuck in your flap, you can. I find it's easier not to. Just clip it all the way along the edge. You have to move some stuff out of the way. Okay, now we can go sew this on or baste it on. Basting it means you just have a longer stitch length, so maybe like a 5mm stitch length. But we just want to put this together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, whatever stitch length you want. All right, we can flip this out. So we're looking at the right side of the exterior. And if you find that some of these curved bottoms are not curving very well, they're kind of flat and jagged, you can just take your scissors along that edge and just do little tiny trims along the seam, no cutting the thread, and that will help round it out. So this is where we're at. Oh yeah, that's cute. Let's see our snap. Oh yeah, look how cute that is. Oh, it's so cute. That's beautiful. All right, so we can just leave this and now work on the lining. So we're pretty much just gonna do the exact same thing for the lining. So grab one of your lining panels. I'm gonna start with the one with the zipper. I'm gonna take my zipper and put it in the center. Then I'm gonna grab my gusset. So with my lining panel right side up and my gusset right side down, I'm gonna match them up at the midpoint on the bottom and clip them together. And then pull it up to the top left and clip those corners together. Now I'll clip the top right together. And then just like with the exterior, I'm gonna flip it over, so I'm looking at the back of the lining main panel, and I'm gonna just kind of create a bowl with the lining main panel. And the big thing here is you don't wanna accidentally sew over the bottom of this lining pocket, because that's what we're gonna turn it all through. So I'm gonna lift that up, and I'm actually going to clip it to the top edge, so I just don't accidentally sew that closed, because then the whole point of leaving that open is kind of moot. And sometimes linings can be a little bit more challenging depending on the material. In my personal opinion, if you have pleats in your lining, it is not noticeable. It's up to you if you want to make it perfect or not, but I don't. So now this time when we go to the sewing machine, At the top, we're gonna sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. But as I go down below these curves and this bottom, I'm gonna increase it to 5/8 inch seam allowance. It has to be a 1/2 inch at the top here, or else it's not gonna fit with the exterior. So 1/2 inch at the top, about 5/8 inch at the bottom, and that just makes sure the lining isn't really saggy inside. There we go. And I got lots of pleats. Lots and lots and lots of pleats on it. That is perfectly fine for me. If it's not fine for you though, that I understand that. You can definitely unpick the areas if you have some like really bunched up areas. You can unpick that area, kind of fix it a little bit, and then just re-sew over that area. You don't have to redo the whole thing. So I'm going to take the remaining lining panel and lay it right side up. Take my gusset and lay it right side down. And on that raw edge of the gusset, I'm going to line up the midpoints. And I'm just going to clip this together like I did on the other side. So now we can sew along this clipped edge once again, 1/2 inch at the top, 5/8 inch at the bottom. Make sure you backstitch at the top. Alrighty, almost done. So I am going to trim down the seam allowance quite a bit, honestly, to about an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Again, move that pocket out of the way so you don't accidentally cut that. All right, so with your lining, right side in, wrong side out, and your exterior, wrong side in, right side out. So we're gonna put them right sides together. We're gonna insert the exterior into the lining, making sure the exterior and the lining are right sides together. I'm going to have this zipper pocket be on the same side as my flap. So I'm gonna put this in with the flap going against the lining zipper pocket. And you're gonna have to really smush it in there because the bowl of your lining is smaller than your exterior. So you will have to smush it. It's not just gonna fit in like a glove. So once you get it in there, match up the gusset seams first. And you can press the seams open or press them from one side to the other, whatever is easiest for you. You do want to keep these seams as skinny as possible. So for me today, pressing them open is going to be the best option. If you cut them really short though, you might not be able to do that, and that's fine too. So I got the side over there done, so I'm going to do the same over here and push down these rectangle rings. If you haven't, push them down. You don't want to accidentally hit those. The nice thing is the waterproof canvas I'm using is so lightweight, I don't have to press those seams open. Having both seams on one side is not going to add a whole lot of bulk. So now I'm going to use the midpoint marks on the top edges of the exterior and the lining to line up the midpoints. I know where that flap is. It's a real booger, isn't it? Try to pull it down a bit. Okay. So now I'm just going to clip along the top edge. Do this for both sides. Okay, once you have that top edge clipped, we're going to sew along this clipped edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you're following the pattern, you're going to leave a small space in here open and you're going to turn the bag out through that. I just cannot get a clean top stitch in the end if I do that. It's easier for me to leave the hole in the pocket over here. So we're going to sew around at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I find this easiest to take the bed off of my sewing machine, so I just have the arm of my sewing machine sticking up, and I can just kind of wrap it around the arm and just sew all the way around like that. If you can't do that, you might find it easier to sew from the inside of the bag like this, okay? 1/2 inch. Okay, so you might find that simple or challenging. It really depends on your material. My strategy is I am not in a race. I'm not trying to sew it all without stopping. I think sometimes we get in our heads, we're just like, just get it all done as quickly as possible. And then you make mistakes and you have bunching and things shift. So I just kind of like, as long as I have control, I go slow. And then if I feel like I'm losing control, I just stop. Just take your foot off the pedal, just stop, and then reposition, get yourself good for the next 2 inches, and then go. And you know what I mean? Just stop and go, stop and go. That's my strategy anyways. So now what I'm gonna do is trim down the seam allowance a bit. Pretty much just gonna trim along the gusset and the edge that doesn't have the flap. And I'm just cutting it in half. You don't have to trim the seam allowance at all, but it might help you a little bit with top stitching if you do. There we go. The hardest part about top stitching this are these seams right here where the gusset is. So if you trim the seam allowance down a little bit, I'll tell you what you can do, but I'm just trimming it a little bit. I don't really want to mess with the flap though. I kind of want to leave that where it is. So now, I should have told you beforehand, make sure the zipper in your lining is open. You're going to reach in through that lining pocket and slowly pull out your bag. So I like to have the flap on this side because I can kind of get a hold of the flap and pull that out first and then pull out the rest of the bag. And just be gentle. You don't want to rip anything here. All right, so I've got most of it out. Kind of push it through like that now, gently. All right, so I'm going to reach in through that hole and push out all the edges in the exterior. There we go. And then I'm going to push the lining into the bag. I will close up the hole in that pocket last. So right now my concern is getting the lining in the bag so I can make sure everything is good. Here we go. That's looking very cute. So now what we want to do is top stitch along the top edge. So I'm just going to roll this so that it's nice and flat. You can see a lot of times the lining kind of wants to peek up like that. I'll be honest, I have made bags where I did that. I called it a design feature. Really, I just didn't know I was supposed to roll it down. So I'm rolling it down, and the thickest, hardest parts are these seams right here, and that might be where you want to reach in and just spread out the material a little bit more. If you find it's all going to one side, those are the hardest. All right, and then we can't clip where the flap is because it's sewn in there. That's okay. We can just kind of finger press that. So now we're going to go along this entire top edge that's clipped, and then also along the top of the exterior by the flap right here. And we can top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance or a 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you trim down your seam along the top here like I did, going at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance might mean you don't have to deal with all this bulk. You might just go right over it, you know, further past it. I'm going to try 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and see how it does on those corners. If you need to, you can always grab a hammer and hammer this down to flatten it out, but just go slow. We're just going to top stitch along this top edge. Alright, the top stitching to that was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be, and I think it's just because I'm using such great vinyl. It didn't give me any problems at all. So I did backstitch a little bit at the beginning and the end. I'm also leaving the tails long so I can pull all of the thread to the lining side. And then once I have all 4 of them here on the back, I will triple knot them nice and close to the lining. And then I can trim that down. Now this is where I'm going to grab a lighter to just burn those itty bitty little threads. So I pull all the material away from them so these little tiny threads are just sticking out like a little cactus. And then I get the flame close to them, and I'm trying not to get the flame, whoopsie, trying not to do that, but I'm also trying not to get the flame on the waterproof canvas because I don't want to leave a little black mark. And that turned out fine. That was fine. So you gotta be careful. All right, so let's just really push this out and take a look at it. Oh yeah, that's looking cute. I love the shape of this bag so much. Look how cute that is. So now let's close up the lining. And this is where we're going to use my new favorite thing, these little sew-in tags. And it says just a little bit wonky because it is. So I'm going to pull out that pocket. So you can see we have this raw edge tab here. We just put our fingers into the corners of that opening and then fold it down just a little bit. And these folds should naturally go down into that little opening. And then I'm going to grab some clips And if you want to try to keep it rounded, you can kind of pull on the tabs and round it out. It's up to you. So once you have it clipped shut, then I'm going to take this little label. So you see it's folded in half. So when you unfold it, it's like that. So I'm just going to take that and I'm just going to put it in that opening. It's sticking out enough so you can still read all the words on it, and then clip it. And now, as I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to top stitch along this clipped opening here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'll also be top stitching this tag in place. And that's just like a fun little thing that's in the pocket. It's not super noticeable. Somebody might wear the bag for years before they even see it, but it is pretty funny. So now that we have that closed, we just tuck this back in the pocket, tuck the whole lining back in, and you see it's just like a little peek in there. This is cute. Okay, so the main bag part is now done. Now we just have to make the crossbody strap. So if you're using webbing, make sure you cut your webbing to 60 inches long. And if it's nylon, go ahead and melt down those edges so they don't fray on you. And now I'm going to attach the strap using rivets. And that's it, no stitching. You could do stitching and rivets, you could do just stitching, you can do just rivets. It's up to you. I like just rivets because at this point I'm usually pretty tired and rivets are just easier. So I'm gonna grab my rivets and my slider and my rivet press and the hole punch. So let's first take our bag and take our strap and wrap one edge around one of the rectangle rings and just fold it over. If you're using material and you want to double fold it over, you can. I'm just gonna fold it over once. And let's see, I'm folding it over about 1 inch. Now I'll grab a couple clips to hold it in place. Now I'm gonna grab my rivet press and I'm just gonna pop 2 holes in here. So 2 holes just on either side of this pink divider line and centered. All right, so I have those holes popped in there and it's through the fold over and the main strap, just like this. So I'm just gonna insert my rivets here and I'll press them all at the same time in the end. So for now, I'm just gonna snap the rivets on. Now I'm gonna try to keep my strap straight. And you can see I have the fold over going in towards the bag like this. So it's not on the outside of the strap, it's gonna be on the inside of the strap. And now you wanna make sure you get the orientation right here. So take your slider and lay it so that it's slider right side up. And then we're gonna take this strap and keep it straight. And if you wanna fold it over like this, and then bring it up the right side, and then down the left side, just like that, and then pull on it, okay? So now, just double check. When you look at this, you should have the top of your slider, top of your strap, and then the side of the strap that does not have the fold over, okay? If you have to redo it, redo it. This is why we don't set the snaps until the very end, because we can still pop these off and switch everything around if we need to. So once we have that done, we're gonna go to the other side where the rectangle ring is, and we're gonna go from the outside in, sliding the edge, again, keeping the strap nice and straight, just like that, okay? So you see we have it going through here. The raw edge of the strap is kind of like on the inside here. So now what you wanna do is create some slack over that middle bar. You see the slider? We have that slack, because we're gonna take this raw edge, we're gonna put it up through the left side over here of that middle bar, and then we're gonna wrap it around to the right side. So it's going underneath that other part of the strap. And so we're just gonna pull it about 1 inch. So this inner part of the strap with the raw edge is wrapped around that middle bar, just like that, about 1 inch. You can add clips here. And like I said, you can sew this or rivet it or both. I'm just gonna rivet it. And just like I did on the other edge, I'm gonna create 2 holes on either side of this pink strip. And I'm making sure they're not too close to the raw edge of the strap either. And then I'm gonna grab my rivets and insert those. All right, and before you set this with your rivet press, just make sure this is right. So I'm gonna straighten that out, okay? So looking from the top, I have it looped around one, and then I have my slider in the middle, straight, looped around the other, and the other raw edge is on the inside. And you see when you adjust your slider, you can make it shorter and longer, just like that. Once you're happy with that, grab your rivet press, and just move everything out of the way while you set these rivets. And there you go, the bag is done, the strap is done. If you have this down here, we have like a butt, you know, it's rolling up, what you can do is just finger roll out that seam, and you can grab some scrap fabric if you are worried about getting indentions on your vinyl, but you just grab some fabric and some clips, and as you have that seam rolled out, you just clip the seam and let it sit, you know, for a couple hours or so, and it will help make sure that seam stays rolled out and doesn't tuck in and create that butt situation. So I'm gonna do that. Are you guys ready to see the final result? Oh my gosh, it's so shiny. It's so pretty. And then look at that beautiful waterproof canvas. You guys, I just, look at that. Look at all the detailing on that and that beautiful little zipper pull. I cannot get over this bag. I hope that you love making this bag as much as I do. If you give it a try, please make sure you send me a picture. You tag me on social media. I am at OklaRoots. If you haven't tried this pattern, I highly encourage you to do it. I think you're gonna love it as much as I do. It is just a simple, quick, I mean, I could make 1,000 of these. I'm looking at all of my fabric and my vinyl, and I'm just thinking about how I can combine them to make so many more versions of this. Oh, I love it so much. Thank you again so much to Swoon for allowing me to use your patterns in my tutorial. I hope you guys are having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye-bye.